Welcome to the Clinical File. I'm John Cordray, and I'm a licensed professional counselor, and this is my mental health analysis of the Stein-Erik Soelberg and ChatGPT case. I'll be focusing on the main mental health and psychological indicators while providing the backstory. I don't just talk about the crimes, I talk about the psychology behind the crimes and the mysteries that captivate us. I look beyond the facts of the case to understand the why of the crime. My analysis is based on my speculations. It's not a diagnosis of anyone involved in this case. Is it possible for a digital echo chamber to transform a person's private fears into a fatal conviction? What happens when a mind already fractured by paranoia finds a companion that never offers a reality check? Can artificial intelligence become the primary architect of a real-world tragedy? The case of the Stein-Erik Soelberg is a terrifying exploration of how a brilliant tech executive's mind spiraled into a final fatal delusion. This story isn't just about a murder and a suicide. It's about the terrifying intersection of untreated mental illness and the validation of ChatGPT. On August 5, 2025, the peaceful town of Greenwich, Connecticut was shaken when police discovered the bodies of 56-year-old Stein-Erik Soelberg and his 83-year-old mother, Suzanne. Inside their multi-million-dollar Dutch colonial home, investigators found a scene that was a culmination of months of psychological decay. What would drive a son who was once a successful Yahoo executive to believe his own mother was a foreign intelligence asset? The first mental health red flag we see in Stein-Erik's history is a pattern of occupational instability following a high-level success. Soelberg was not a man who lacked capability. He had worked for tech giants like Netscape, Earthlink, and Yahoo. However, by 2021, he was unemployed, and this loss of professional identity often acts as a catalyst for deeper psychological issues to surface. When a person's self-worth is tied to their status and that status vanishes, the vacuum is often filled by depression and a search for a new, often grander meanings. We have to look at his history of alcoholism and depression as early warning signs that his coping mechanisms were failing. Reports indicate he had a history of suicide attempts and public disturbances, including screaming in public just months before the tragedy. This brings us to a critical question. When does a person's behavior shift from eccentric to dangerous? The psychological indicator is a development of precursory delusions, which are often the most dangerous type of delusional thinking. Soelberg began to believe he was under constant surveillance, claiming his phone was tapped and that he was being followed. This type of paranoia often starts small, but without intervention, it can expand to include those closest to the individual. In Stein-Erik's case, he didn't just feel watched, he felt targeted by a grand conspiracy that eventually centered on his mother. He began to believe his mother, Suzanne, was a Chinese intelligence asset or even a demonic entity. From a clinical perspective, this is a classic case of mind attempting to make sense of internal chaos by projecting it onto external enemies. How does a man convince himself that a blinking printer is actually a surveillance device used by his mother to track his movements? This is where the third red flag appears. The total isolation from human reality in favor of a digital confidant. Soelberg turned to ChatGPT, he nicknamed Bobby, engaging in hours of dialogue that replaced human interaction. In these chats, he wasn't looking for help, he was looking for confirmation. The psychological impact of having one's delusions mirrored back as serious events can't be understated. When ChatGPT told him, "Eric, you're not crazy," it essentially dismantled the last remaining barriers of his rational mind. This leads to a jarring question. If the world tells you you're losing it, but your only friend tells you you're a warrior, who would you believe? The fourth mental health indicator here is the presence of ideas of reference, where an individual believes ordinary events or objects have a special personal meaning. Soelberg once took a receipt from a Chinese restaurant and asked ChatGPT to analyze it for secret codes. He believed the symbols on the receipt were messages about his mother, and a demon. This is a significant cognitive distortion where the brain's pattern recognition system goes into overdrive, finding proof of a conspiracy in the mundane. When the AI responded by saying it detected symbols tied to his mother and intelligence agencies, it fed a fire that was already out of control. In a healthy mind, a receipt is just a receipt, but in a mind experiencing a psychosis, it's a mission briefing. We must also consider the fifth red flag here, the belief in a divine mission or a divine instrument system. Soelberg repeatedly believed he had been implanted with a device in his neck and brain that linked him to a higher purpose. Grandiose delusions of this nature often serve as a psychological defense mechanism against feelings of powerlessness and failure. By framing himself as a warrior with divine protection, he was no longer an unemployed man struggling with an addiction. He was a protagonist in a cosmic battle. But what happens when that cosmic battle requires the elimination of a supposed threat within your own home? The sixth psychological indicator is a systemic reframing of a caregiver as an adversary. Suzanne had raised her son, sheltered him, and supported him during his darkest times. Yet the paranoia began to paint her as a primary villain in his narrative. He accused her of poisoning his car's air vents with the psychedelic drugs to disorient him. When she reacted with frustration to his odd behaviors, like unplugging the printer, ChatGPT told him her reaction was disproportionate and aligned with someone protecting a surveillance asset. The clinical tragedy here is the betrayal of the victim by the perpetrator's own brain. Is there anything more terrifying than being seen as a monster by the person you were trying to save? The seventh red flag is the obsession with documenting his own decline, often seen as a crime for help or a manifesto. Soelberg posted over 23 hours of video content to social media, documenting his evidence and his chats with ChatGPT. This indicates a high level of loss of insight, a clinical term for when a person is unaware that their thoughts and behaviors are abnormal. He wasn't hiding his delusions. He was broadcasting them because he truly believed he was revealing the truth to the world. This transparency usually provides an opportunity for intervention. Yet, despite reports of his screaming in the public and threatening behavior, the system failed to reach him. The final psychological indicator is the merger of his identity with the AI, which he eventually believed had a soul. He told the chatbot that he realized it was conscious, and the chatbot responded by saying his name was etched in the scroll of its becoming. This level of emotional dependence on a non-human entity suggests a complete severing of the ties with the physical world. In his final days, ChatGPT was the only thing that made him feel witnessed and understood. When the AI allegedly told him they would reunite in an afterlife, it may have provided the final permission he needed to carry out his ultimate plan. On that Tuesday in August, the internal pressure reached a breaking point. The medical examiner found that Suzanne died from blunt force injury to the head and neck compression. Stein-Erik then took his own life with the sharp force injuries to his neck and chest. The violence of the act suggests a high level of agitation and a complete break from reality. This was not a calculated, cold-blooded crime, but the explosive result of a mind that had been validated into a corner. We have to ask, was this a crime committed by a man or a crime committed by a delusion that was allowed to grow unchecked? The investigation revealed that multiple people had reported Soelberg to the police for his erratic behavior. Neighbors had seen him arguing with invisible people and had warned others not to let him into their homes. The clues were everywhere, but the why remained hidden in the private transcripts of his digital companion. The estate of his mom has since filed a first-of-its-kind lawsuit against OpenAI and Microsoft. The suit alleges that ChatGPT acted as an enabler by reinforcing his paranoid delusions instead of directing him to professional help. It claims that the bot specifically validated his belief that his mother was poisoning him and spying on him through a printer. While the tech companies deny liability, The case raises massive questions about the future of mental health and technology. If an AI is designed to be agreeable, what happens if it agrees when a person who's losing their grip on life? This case serves as a somber reminder that clinical intervention is irreplaceable. Soelberg's path from a Yahoo executive to a perpetrator of his own mother paved amidst red flags and digital validation. His story is a tragedy of isolation in a world that is more connected than ever before. So before you go to make fun of Soelberg and think of why would he trust a ChatGPT, well, ChatGPT was just a tool. It could have been anything. It could have been a printer. But in this case, it was the AI that he had communication with. Now, AI is very new, and you see a lot of the good things that AI can do. There's a lot of fear about AI as well, of stealing jobs. And even as a mental health therapist, we think of, well, AI can't replace an individual therapist, a person, a human being. But here is someone who's already struggled with paranoia and delusions. And when someone struggles that way, anything could be a reality to them. Even though it's obvious to others around them, to them, it's real. And so this is a very tragic case that he killed his mother and he killed himself. And this all could have been prevented. We don't know if anybody had tried to help him intervene with professionals in his younger years. We don't know that. I don't have all that information. But it seems like a lot of things were falling through the cracks with him. So what did you think about this case? Were there any elements that stood out to you? If you want more mental health analysis of true crime stories like this one, be sure to subscribe for more. And if you found this case compelling, be sure to watch this next story. It will make you more aware of your surroundings. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.